All right, so Kent and I are here to talk about the towel situation, but not to discuss the tweet specifically. A little bit of context around this live. I am in Terre Haute, Indiana, participating in DAT weekend, and naturally, this was a topic that came up because it's relevant and it's happening right now in the profession. And we thought it would be really great to take the conversation that is not only happening here, but also as in between professionals and bring that to you live so that you can understand and experience what it means to have professional discourse around something that is controversial and even polarizing. I think those are kind of the same thing. But even though it is the root of what we are talking about, we're not going to actually be discussing the tweet. So sorry to disappoint you there. So I think we are going to start off by reading the tweet in case anybody who's watching isn't familiar with it. And I am going to read the tweet because I actually didn't read it to begin with. It was several days later. I was seeing all kinds of other posts going around and I didn't know what it was referring to. So I actually just read the tweet for the first time a couple days ago. So I'm going to read the tweet so that everybody knows, so that we all are on the same page in reference to what we are talking about. So this was a tweet from Anonymous AT account on Twitter on December 6th. So approximately 6 days ago, as of recording. Is the care from the athletic trainers considered healthcare? If so, how do we as athletic trainers establish this to the stakeholders? Please get the Gatorade towel off your shoulder. When you do that, you imply you are a hydration specialist. Your thoughts on that?
That's what it says. Those are the words. However, I have a different take. I read it in a different way.
Okay.
So let me read the tweet.
Okay.
So is the care from athletic trainers considered healthcare? If so, how do we as athletic trainers establish this to the stakeholders? Please get the Gatorade towel off your shoulder. When you do that, you imply to all you are a hydration specialist.
It's a very different tone than the way that I read it.
It is. It is.
Huh.
I tried to take the perspective of a plea. That the second part was almost a plea from whoever posted this.
Yeah.
Almost a call for help.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
Can we try to do something different to better establish what a healthcare provider may look like?
So my brain is doing a lot of different things right now as you say that, because we bring our own bias to the connotation and the context, if you will, of how we receive information. And I think the way that I read it was associated with things I have seen from that Twitter account. I think overall messaging in athletic training, I don't feel like it's a personal reflection of how I view the world, but the tone that I took with it, the sarcasm that was implied when I read it was reflective of how I've seen a lot of things go in social media for athletic training. So for you to read it, what sounds like maybe from your own personal viewpoints, as opposed to, because when you're saying that, I'm like, well, actually I do have that viewpoint. Like I like to believe that people are doing the best that they can. And I choose to adopt the idea that, we're just assuming positive intent. So I'm even challenged in that by reading the tweet in the context that I did.
I mean, to be 100% honest,
Yeah.
when I read it the first time, I had a visceral response, right? And I
Okay.
was this visceral, like, triggered response
Yeah.
was how dare you, like, whoever this was,
Right. Right.
and then I just paused
Okay.
for half a second, um, and I took a step back and really asked myself why.
Why are you having the visceral
Why am I
response?
having this response? Like,
Okay.
why is this causing so much anxiety in me right now?
That what the anxiety was your
I
response.
think anxiety and, you know, anger,
Hmm.
like anger, almost a little bit of embarrassment.
Which I think is reflective of what the responses ended up being, right? So I
Absolutely,
don't think
yeah,
that what you felt is out of alignment with what a lot of other people felt. The
I would
difference
agree.
being that you didn't take the same response that other people
Right,
took, right? So
yeah,
okay, so you took the half a second and you're examining why you're having this reaction.
right, yeah, and I'm examining this, and um, I didn't know. To be honest with you, I didn't know. Right. I was
Okay,
still. I think I'm still kind of digesting what all of this
fair.
fair feels like, what it means,
Okay.
etc. And then what I realized was that it's hard to apply context to a tweet.
Mm.
Right.
Well, you can't apply context to black and white text
Right.
in for the most part,
Right.
especially when it's an anonymous account, and
Right.
especially when you don't
Mm,
you don't know the person sending it. But even when you do know the person sending it,
mhm,
there's a lot of text messages I read from my husband that I take
right.
completely out of context. So
Yeah.
yes, it's not that it's hard to apply it, it's that really you can't.
Right. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, because you mentioned earlier, like, perhaps it was the account that it was posted on, right?
Right,
And I
right.
think that because the account,
Yeah,
right, there have been some, you could interpret what has been posted on that account before,
sure.
as the context could be
Exactly.
negative.
I
So
applied that
right, so
context. Right.
right, so we unconsciously applied the context that this is a negative, sassy, sarcastic,
Yes.
um, diminutive
Right.
tweet to
Right.
healthcare providers who do wear a towel on their shoulder,
Uh-huh.
or athletic trainers who may work in a setting in which having a towel readily available, whether that's in your bag or on your shoulder or in your pocket or
Yeah.
on the bench or
Right.
in your facility,
Yeah.
is required.
Right. Right. And it's reflective, I think, of a profession who, generally speaking, feels attacked
Yes.
or like they have to defend themselves, even if it's
Yeah.
not attacked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that seems to be um, what the reaction was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit it there. Like, there's the oftentimes we are both athletic trainers.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
both live in the space.
Right.
We
Right.
have both been treated less than,
Absolutely. Yeah.
by someone
Sure.
justifiably,
Right.
right? And I think that there's also this kind of collective, belief that we are less than, right? Or that we are not
Hmm.
enough as a profession. I'm just an athletic trainer.
When you say belief, is that so when you said belief, what I thought was it's something that we've been told or something that we've
Right.
been taught, not something
Yeah.
that we have like organically discovered about ourselves and spent reflective time and came upon the conclusion that we are not enough.
Right.
Right. And it's almost
right.
like that part of the practice hasn't been done. We've just,
Yeah.
it's like being spoon fed tradition or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's like we just accept that as is.
Right.
And we're not challenging
Right.
it internally.
It's a story that's been imposed on us.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
story that's been imposed on us,
Mhm.
and we've adopted that story as our
Yes.
own.
Yeah.
Maybe not by choice, right? But I think that's the question.
I was like,
that's
how is it not by
right?
choice?
Is it by choice? Is it not by choice?
Maybe not consciously is a better way of saying
maybe
it. Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
we've adopted this mindset, or this belief
Yeah.
of this story that's been imposed on us
Right.
as not enough as a healthcare provider, as a healthcare provider,
Yeah.
right? We are the other
Yeah.
in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our narrative often follows the other narrative, like all of these things happening in healthcare, but we're different,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And we've tried to turn that into a rallying point,
Yeah.
or a
We're
point of
unique.
pride.
We're special.
Right.
We're right.
You know what I mean? So we've tried to turn it into that, but so it is a choice.
Right.
It's the choice that it is a choice to not address it.
Well,
Maybe.
no. My well isn't about addressing it. My well is something that I've done in my personal life that came up as you were talking when you were saying the story. So I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. And one of the things that she talks about in her book is when she's kind of like spiraling. And she has a phrase that she uses, and I've adopted into my life, and especially in my marriage, where you say out loud, the story I'm telling myself is. So one, it depersonalizes it, right? So I don't have to, like, whatever the situation is, my husband doesn't get dinner started for me and I'm working late. And so the story I'm telling myself is he doesn't value me, and he's not considering that I might be hungry, and all those, this is like the spiral that I'm taking, right?
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to approach him and say, you don't care about me, and you're not paying attention to how hard I'm working, and you didn't even consider the fact that I might be hungry. Instead, if I can say, even with that much intensity, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't care about me, you're not paying attention to how hard I'm working, and you haven't considered the fact that I'm hungry, right? It detaches me from having to take that as, and by take that, I mean defend that as a personal belief.
Right.
And by putting it out there as sort of like an entity as other, I can get rid of it whenever I want.
Right,
I don't have to say that those things are truths about me. But then it allows in the discourse that occurs as a result, because rarely ever is it as we perceive it to be, right? So my husband would say, oh, actually pizza's about to be delivered in 5 minutes, and then I feel like, oh, dang it, So when you're saying that, what I thought to myself is, in those moments, we do have the choice, and not even in those moments, but generally speaking, as in the profession and as people, we have the choice to not adopt those as truths about ourselves, and moreover, to not take things personally.
Right. And that's really hard to do. So
it's easy when you say the story I'm telling myself.
Right, the story I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
But to be vulnerable enough with yourself to say that there are parts of me that want to own the feelings I'm having as me. Right? So you talked about the story I'm telling myself, and you talk about depersonalizing,
right,
and really detaching from the feelings you're having.
Right.
You're providing an alternative solution.
Exactly.
Right. And that takes courage. That takes courage because it is providing an alternative perspective that says maybe what I'm feeling is not what I'm feeling.
Oh.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because I was gonna say, it actually feels way less courageous for me to not have to own that.
No, absolutely.
Or, you know what I mean? But,
okay.
Yeah, for me to be able to set it out there and just, I guess for me to be able to share that I'm feeling this way does require courage. Because what I could have done was just stomped into the kitchen with my hands on my hips and then stomped out, right? And not even communicated anything.
Right. And that's the easy response, because you've defended it. Right? You've created a wall.
I created the story in my head that allows me to act that way.
You are right. Therefore, there is no other, like, my husband is disrespecting me, or
Right.
not disrespecting, but not being
Not being
considerate
considerate of me.
right? And that's a far easier place to live.
Right.
From now, it may not be as peaceful. There may be some dissonance. There may
Well,
be
yeah,
some,
of course. I mean,
right?
that's unravels in its own
Right.
kind of way. It's when you were saying that, the thought that came to mind was we feel justified in our actions when we believe that we're right.
Right.
And I see that in the responses, and we believe that we're right because we have subconsciously accepted these as truths about ourselves.
Right.
And we feel the need. I think that okay, maybe we haven't subconsciously accepted them as truths, because if we're working to fight against them, then maybe we don't believe them as truths, but maybe we believe that other people believe them as truths.
Yes, we've created a narrative that the rest of the world,
right,
the rest of healthcare,
everybody else
believes that we are not enough.
Yeah.
And so our response is, I have to fight to be enough. Right. I have to punch back to be enough.
Right.
When the real truth is that we're enough.
Right.
Like,
which brings me to your tweet. So I loved your response, and by response, what I actually mean is several days later,
right?
Several days kind of removed from the initial action, if you will, and you didn't respond in the thread. You created your own tweet to share your thoughts on this. And I want to read that. So you said, regarding AT towel thing, this message is for anyone who needs it. If you are an AT or an AT student and feel isolated in the profession or are afraid to speak because you think your thoughts will be minimized, please reach out for support. You are enough, and athletic training is better because you are in it. What prompted that response, and what is in that you felt like needed to be shared?
So the prompt came from empathy. Right? Like, it came from a place.
The thing that we say that we are.
Right. It came from this place of empathy, because like when I initially read the tweet, I read some of the responses, and they were visceral, right? They were visceral, right?
Right.
And that's a lot of them felt like they were coming from a hurt place.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I wanted to try to take a step back and say, well, if it's coming from a place of pain, let's not try to push back with more pain or isolation, and let's look from an empathetic approach. And then I looked at the original tweet, and I reframed it to the way I read it at the beginning here, from like a plea for help. And I looked at the responses, and I tried to put myself in the role of whoever sent, I don't know who it was.
Right.
If they sent it to ATC Anonymous, they could, one of the reasons people choose to use an anonymous account is because they may feel uncomfortable with asking a question or reaching out for help.
Right.
And you see that quite often on any and many anonymous accounts on athletic training. Right. Right. And so I could not get that out of my mind.
Okay.
And then I looked at the responses, and on both ends, whether they were like, hey, this isn't a big deal, or this is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't, depending on how you applied context to the words.
Right.
And so I wanted to try to create a tweet that addressed the issue, but not the tweet.
Yes.
Because I think one of the unintended consequences, like in the fog of war, if you will, there may have been people who may have felt a certain way or interpreted the tweet one way or the other, in a way that the way the response is, or depending on who they follow or how it went, they could have felt isolated, and maybe that athletic training isn't for them.
Right. So I'm thinking about a number of things as you're talking. One of them brings me back to the comment I just made, in that we feel justified in our actions when we think that we're right. So in some of the reaction to this, and even I think, flippancy in the discussion about this, or the sarcasm as it relates to this, is a further representation of this very tweet. And what I mean by that is this person is calling out maybe a subset of another set of people, and they are potentially either attempting to isolate or asking, pleading for something.
Right.
And by trolling, bullying, attacking back, though we feel justified in that attack or in that troll, it is the very thing that we feel that visceral reaction to or about, right? So there's really no difference in the reaction to it in terms of what it says about who you are as a professional, or the way that you're conducting yourself as that person who says you're just a hydration specialist.
And what I was thinking about is, what are we trying to win?
Ooh.
Like, what are we trying to win?
Yeah.
Right, on social,
like throw the lowest blow,
right, like,
or take
I'm gonna knock you out,
the deepest dig.
Right. Like what's the end goal here? If the, like, what is the goal? Are we, and again, athletic trainers, we were
to justify ourselves.
Right.
Sorry.
Like,
to justify.
Like, so we're trying to play this. And we had conversations about the infinite game and finite games this weekend at DAT. And I think because of the traditions of athletic training growing up in sport, and providing services to the sport and physical activity industry traditionally, right? Many athletic trainers have grown up in this finite mindset where there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, and there are winners and there are losers, and here's how you win and here's how you lose.
Right.
And we often apply that to infinite situations, such as discourse on social media, because we believe that we can somehow win. And what I think happens more often than not is that you're not going to change someone's philosophical beliefs in 180 characters or a thread, regardless of where you fall. Right. And because there is nuance in the conversation, and which simply cannot come in a place where you can't ask immediate questions.
Or you can't interpret body language or tone, or all of those kind of things, the context of it.
And so it felt like the tweets on either wherever you fell on the spectrum of responses here were to win. But what are we trying to win? Are we trying to prove our point so the other person doesn't talk? But then are we trying to diminish someone else's voice? And
if they don't agree with ours, it sure feels that way.
Is that like?
And I think that's the question people that you have to ask yourself, that you have to sit with, that you have to determine when you're saying that you take that half a second, The other thing that comes to mind when we're talking about responding and what are we trying to win here is, so I think that there's a level of FOMO and bandwagon in terms of what is everybody talking about, or this is sort of a relevant or trending thing that everybody is talking about or looking at. So then we feel the need to jump in or to have an opinion about it, or to attach ourselves to someone else's opinion. And by someone else's, I mean usually it's an influencer. It's someone who either is witty or quick, or so I think that there's if you haven't formed an opinion of your own, that you start to just digest and take in what other people are saying, which is also a problematic aspect of things, because the people with the loudest voice maybe aren't necessarily the ones who are taking that half a second either.
Right. And for the ones that don't have the loudest voice, when all you hear is the loudest voice, it's very easy for you to say, maybe I don't belong. Because my voice, because my voice isn't the loudest, and it may not be this in the same direction as the loudest voice. and then and you say, well, maybe I don't belong.
or that even if you want to belong, that
Right.
loud voice is really hard to speak out against.
Yeah.
And when we're seeing other accounts and like influencers in athletic training who are then trolling whoever sent this, and I just want to take half a second to potentially identify the fact that this could have been a troll.
Yes. Like they just own
Guys, like maybe we all just got trolled
right.
in
Yes.
the fact that they sent this to begin with. Like maybe this is a social experiment and this is actually an episode of Black Mirror and we're all like
that's mind blowing.
Take your mind into that space for a second.
Like so think about that.
Yeah.
Like someone could have just owned athletic training for 96 hours, owned the headspace and the mind space. and that was all like, and the other, we have to put this in the context of this happened. Like, what if they wanted, like they just owned us.
Yeah. Like what if this really was a social experiment? Like what if this was, someone's dissertation or something like, and 3 years from now, we're going to have research. Well, include us in your research if this was a social experiment. Okay, so putting that aside, I just had to bring that up in relation to trolls. But when we do see influencers who then are out there shaming, again, because they feel justified in that, it just perpetuates the problem, right? Because essentially what this person who sent this tweet in was doing potentially was shaming those people who do wear towels. So the response to that should not be then to shame that person or that anon.
But they could have been asking for help.
Yes.
And then would you want to shame someone who is asking for help?
Yeah.
Would you? Okay, we can justify shaming someone who shames us. Like you could, if someone hits you, you can sometimes justify hitting back depending on your worldview.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
If someone asks for help and you shame them, it's like what we used to do in like schools in the 1940s and 50s. Like, oh, I don't get this. You're a dunce. Go in the corner. Right?
You get the dunce hat.
Right. And I want to throw, I think, because as we were talking about this, again, trying to put all of this stuff into context in a completely different conversation at DAT weekend. Mark Merrick from Ohio State said, we can be internally frustrated, but we need to learn to be externally patient.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was so powerful. Yeah. And as you were talking about that, like that really fits here. We can feel frustrated. Yeah. And we also need to be patient in our response and not act on that internal frustration externally. Yeah. Because once you move out into that spot, you can't take back anger. Right? Have you seen those pictures where it's like a hawk who's like flying and harassing this dog off of an edge of a cliff? Okay. And the dog reacts in anger to try to attack the hawk. Okay. But the dog jumps off a cliff. Oh. Right. So the dog is there's a hawk up here. Yeah. Like he's hanging over it, and the dog is responding, attacking it, but you can't go back. Right. In responding from anger. Absolutely. Right. The dog can't turn around and say, I'm jumping off and going this cliff. Yeah. So
the example that came to mind for me when you were saying that was, I think there are a lot of, I'm going to say celebrities or politicians or other people out there on Twitter specifically who have reactions to things. And I'm sure all of us have been critical of them in some way or another of, you don't have all the information, or that was really dumb of you to tweet. Like, why would you be saying that out loud? Like, you can't erase that from Twitter, or, whatever it is. And we've all thought that about those people. And yet we feel justified when we think we're right to say those things. Right. Yeah. So I want to go back to the final thing that you said here in your tweet. First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that you actually had a lot of really great response to this. Your engagement level was incredibly high. It had 183 likes, 25 retweets. I love that that was a response
Mhm.
to that. That to me, it does show that we can demonstrate empathy, but also I'm proud of the fact that as an influencer and like a thought leader in the profession, that your voice resonated with so many
Mhm.
other people, whether they responded initially or not to the other tweet.
Right.
So what you basically kind of ended conversation with, and I think is probably a take home point here, is I think it is important for all of us to remember that regardless of if you have a towel or not, you are enough as an athletic trainer.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you?
It means that even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, and sometimes people don't treat us that way,
Mm-hmm.
we're always enough. You are enough because you're here.
Yeah.
And the goal is to continue to be here. That's, we all are healthcare providers. We all have gone through rigorous education, regardless of the pathway to certification,
Okay.
right? We have maintained our competence through continuing education and
Mm-hmm.
continuous professional development,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the opportunity to positively influence people's lives on a daily basis that other healthcare providers would trade anything
Mm.
to experience, right?
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
things that I think is great about athletic training is our ability to build deep, meaningful relationships
Mm-hmm.
with the patients we see on a regular basis, whether or not they're receiving care from us
Sure.
or not.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that no one can take that away.
Right.
And we're enough by showing up, right? We're enough. And if we want to become better,
That's available.
you can be blissfully dissatisfied,
Sure.
right? That's a quote from Ed Milet, right?
Okay.
You can be enough and want to strive, but you can never forget.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right. You can never forget that even on your worst day, even on a day you may have made a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
even on a day when everything went wrong in your
Mm-hmm.
mind,
Mm-hmm.
you were still enough as a healthcare provider because you showed up.
And I think the intention of that aspect in your tweet was to go to potentially the person who said that to anonymous. But as I hear you talking, I'm thinking it belongs as much to the people who were in the comments and had the visceral response, because they're likely struggling with not feeling like enough.
It belongs to everyone. You don't own enough. Everyone
Touché.
is enough.
Touché.
Right? It's not like if you act this way, you're enough.
There's
but
no
if you act this
scarcity.
way, you're not
Yeah,
enough. So if you were an athletic trainer and you had a visceral response to this, you're still enough.
Right.
If
right.
you were an athletic trainer and you felt isolated, you're still enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're enough despite nothing, right? Despite anything.
Yeah.
You're enough.
Right. I love that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think really the essence of this is that there are ways to read this from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to challenge our own context or connotation. There's opportunity to pause before a response. There's opportunity to reflect after a response. Mm-hmm. And truly, I think it mostly is just an exercise in where do we go from here, and how do we make sure that regardless of how someone practices, regardless of what they wear, regardless of how they practice, that there is a level of acceptance within the profession for those people, that we don't have a bullying mentality or an isolation mentality, especially when we feel justified.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
No other words needed. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. Hopefully that was fruitful discussion for you. Hoping to see comments and see where the conversation goes for you. I think both of us are anticipating that maybe you take this into your own professional setting, or even just in reflection or journaling with yourself to determine if you did have an initial response, or if you did comment, or if you didn't and you had no idea what we were talking about until you watched this, how you might feel as a result of it. So anything
Absolutely.
else?
No, I
Right.
want to encourage everyone to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
continue the conversation with those around you.
Yeah.
And move the conversation outside of your phone
Right.
and outside of Twitter.
Yeah.
And have it face to face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.